Hi guys, it's Graham again. This is the second part of my anodizing video where I'm going to cover the dye process and how you can get some color into your parts that you've made. This one is like, it can be orange, can be blue, black, red, or as I do a lot of the time, it can be just plain straight clear anodizing where you just anodize it and seal it, like these parts here, like this clock here. So if you want to add color to it, I've got a couple of different dyes that I use. I started off by using a product made by a company called Sandol, and they were really kind enough to send me some samples. But when it came time for me to become really serious about my home anodizing, I had to commit to buy large quantities of it because they only really supply to commercial companies. So the supply of samples sort of dried up. But then I came across this company called Caswell, and they have a range of anodizing dyes. They also have a range of complete kits for anodizing. But their dyes are very good and you can buy them online. So these days I buy my anodizing dyes from Caswell. These are a liquid, whereas the original ones I used from Sandol are a powder. Now I've got to admit the Sandol one is the best I've ever used. Slightly better than the Caswell, but it's you've got to buy a lot of it, and it can be really hard to get. So I just got really lucky when I started my whole exercise in learning and teaching myself how to anodize. But the video will continue on and it'll show you the process of me coloring a part that I anodize, and I'll be coloring it in black. I will say right up at the front, black is one of the most difficult colors to anodize, if you can call black a color, but it's really prone to showing up any problems that have occurred during the cleaning process, any spots that are not anodized properly. So it can be a really touchy thing, and it can also be very difficult to get consistent blacks. If you've got a big thing that you're building and it's got multiple black parts to it, you want to try and anodize them all at once, all at the same time, because if you do them in multiple days, sometimes you might end up with one day it'll look a really great dark solid black, and the next day it'll look like a really dark solid blue-ish sort of a color, or it won't be the same sort of black. It'll be a bit touch and go. So when you've got one item that's got multiple parts, you want to try and do it all at once because things can happen. Red is one of the easiest colors to anodize. It's a really easy color. I very rarely go wrong with red. Blue is quite easy, orange is quite easy, and naturally just plain clear anodizing is very easy. The thing about clear anodizing is, or any sort of anodizing to that extent, depends on the type of aluminium you are anodizing. There are multiple grades of aluminium. There is 6062, which is a very soft aluminium, but to machine it's a very sticky aluminium. It's the most common aluminium you'll get when you buy bar stock. It is hard to machine, but it's beautiful to anodize. Then you get another type of aluminium, which is 2000 or plate aluminium, which is great to machine, but it's got a higher silicon content in it, and it doesn't anodize quite as well when you have a clear piece of that and you're not going to color it and it's anodized. It ends up being really sort of satiny type of finish and not a shiny type finish. So that can be a slight problem, but it takes the color quite well as well. So what I'm really getting at is you've just got to experiment with the different types of grades of aluminium you're using and whatever. So when you're starting out by doing some things, don't make a big project and take a lot of time machining it and then decide, oh, I'm going to anodize that, and this is the first time you've anodized something. You could end up with a disaster. Try with some scraps first. Try that piece, that type of aluminium, because there are multiple grades of aluminium. There's 4,000 and there's 6,000 and there's 2,000 grade aluminium, and they will all anodize in slightly different ways. They've got just different properties. So try some samples first, some pieces first, and just get to know the process. It's a very rewarding thing to do, especially when you start to color things. So this is a laser head from my CNC router that I didn't strictly have to anodize the bracket that holds it onto the spindle motor, but I just think it looks cool to do that. So just do it because it looks good. Okay, I'll continue. Now today I'm anodizing these parts that I'm going to be colouring. So what this means is that I've gone through extra measures to ensure the cleanliness of the part. So every process I have double rinsed, changed the water, rinsed again, and this has just come out of the caustic soda and hydrochloric nitric acid baths, and I've used rinsing first, bicarbonate of soda. What you didn't see, I changed the water over again, and I've rinsed it again out of the bicarbonate of soda, and I've used my syringe to make sure all the blind holes are clean. You can see now that when I get the light in the right position here, just how clean this part is. But it's still going to go through ultrasonic cleaning and then another rinse process before I start anodizing. So now the parts are in the acid bath and I'm ready to set the current. So based on my calculations previously, I determined that I need to set it at around 2.77 amps. 2.7, 2.8, that should do. So I come up to here and I start winding up my current. And if I look over there, I can see my meter. And I'll wind this up to around 2.7, 2.8, 2.6, 2.7, that's about 2.78 amps, so that's about right. Just verify down here that I've got bubbles occurring off the plates. The parts have got a little bit of a bubble. Well, if the parts weren't connected properly to the positive line, then I wouldn't be getting any current at all. Without the parts in the bath, there is zero current. So I know that everything's connected and the anodizing process has started. Now I move over to here and I switch my overhead fan on, and I switch the acid air on to circulate the acid, which you'll see down there. I'll just move that bit over there to around about the midpoint. It's going to keep that circulating, and I don't need any coolant on at the moment because my tank temperature is around 19.1, so it's pretty good. I don't think it'll get beyond about 20 degrees. So there you go. Everything's cooking quite nicely. The only thing I have to do is to set the timer, and what I normally do, even though I'm going to colour these parts, I'm going to set the timer for 60 minutes, so that reminds me to come back and check that everything's still okay, and then I'll set it for another 60 minutes. So I just have to hit the start button on that, and away we go. We're counting down. All right, we'll be back later. We're just here at the anodizing tank. I wanted to recover the benefits of using titanium wire to hang your parts in. The beauty of it is you can use it over and over and over again. You never have to clean it, and it's got a nice springiness to it which allows it to be put into holes and it stays there. It maintains a good electrical connection. You can buy it in different sizes and thicknesses. Here you can see I've got a few different sizes and thicknesses bent into different shapes depending on what I'm going to be anodizing. The nice thing is that
I've never had to replace these wires ever. I've had these wires I've been using now for probably about 6 years. So much better than what some people will suggest in using aluminium wire. Yes, aluminium wire is easier to get. You can get it at your local hardware store. But if you're going to do any serious sort of anodizing over any length of time, then you should invest in titanium wire. It's just well worth it. So this is my cabinet where I keep my anodizing dyes and chemicals and acids. It's lockable, so it's actually got double locks on it, so it's not easy for anyone to get into. It's also locked in my garage as well. So over the years I've collected a range of dyes: black, Bordeaux, deep red, another different black. This is a different brand that I used to originally use. I always put the date. It lasts for ages and ages. I mixed this up, you can see, in 2016, and it still works quite well. Up here I've got some orange and some blue and some dark reds and whatever. Also here the concentrated solution for Caswell. Further up the shelf here I've got some of my acid, and what I also use for my degreasing is Caswell SP Deep Greaser, and I haven't remixed the new batch of that up for quite a while, but it's probably getting close to it. Also I keep some caustic soda in there. I keep a container of bicarbonate of soda. Always when you're dealing with acids, have packets of bicarbonate of soda. You'll see if I swing across here, I keep a packet up here. If anything happens or you get a spill, the first thing you do is pour bicarbonate of soda over the acid because it will neutralize it. The other thing I have up here, which I've never actually used, are these white balls which I got from Caswell as well. I have an overhead fan to get rid of the fumes from my anodizing, but if you don't have that, some people actually use these and they float on top of the acid and keep all the fumes contained. So other things I've got, safety goggles which are essential, which I've used, and further down here is my securing clamp, because I don't take the acid out of the tank. Everything stays just the way it is now. When I secure it all and put the lids on and put this big lid on here, and I'll show you a video right at the end, I also have a way that I can lock that in position, so if anyone just randomly comes into the garage, it can't easily be removed. It's got a padlock on it, it's bolted to the wall, and just a precaution. Okay, time is going off, so the first hour is up. Just checking the current, 2.77 still. So now we'll set the timer to start for another 60 minutes. Should start counting down. There we go. Current still stable. Tank temperature's hardly risen much at all, 19.7. So what I do here is I let them soak in the this rinsing solution for a while, and I just keep moving them up and down and keep moving them around, because unlike if I'm just want a natural finish, which basically I would just now take these straight into the boiling water, I'm going to colour it. So being rinsed properly and making sure that all residue of acid and any other solution it's been into prior to this is completely removed before I put it in the colouring bath, because anything that's not quite right will show up. If I just now turn my thermometer on and just check the temperature of this again, as I said before, I want it around 40 degrees or so, and that's 41, pretty spot on. By the time these parts go in there cold, that'll lower the temperature a degree or so, so I'll be spot on temperature wise. So now I take the first one and I'm going to just shake it a bit to drip it off, and I drop that in the black colour. I don't want it to touch the bottom, I want it to be completely suspended and not touching anything. Take this one out, and I want it to go into the colour as well. So there we go. These two parts actually screw together, so I want them to be pretty close to the same colour. That's why I'm anodizing them both at the same time, for the same time, so that they match up. And you can see now, just by looking at the part, how the black is soaking in to the anodized solution. So I will leave that now for a few minutes, and I'll check it again. One thing I don't want to do is to leave it in there too long, because what happens is you get a powdery effect when it's finished sealing, which you can remove, but I prefer not to have it. You want to get the timing pretty right, and just experience will teach you what that is going to be. But usually I like to give it no more than about, say, 5 minutes or so. It's been about 5 minutes. I've been agitating these mostly of the time, all the time, basically during that, when the camera's been off, and I've been moving these up and down. Now what I'm going to do is dunk these into the filtered water that I had before, because I'm not going to use it again, and it doesn't really matter if it's going to get coloured. And this is where I can sort of see what the anodizing is going to be like, how rich the black is, and you can see that's looking pretty darn good to me. I'll put that bit of timber there, and I'll take this one, move it over to there, and I'll take that, put that there, and that'll allow me to suspend that one there, and rinse them off. It's not vitally important that you rinse it off completely. From now on, if there's any problem with the anodizing or any problem with the colouring, it's too late. It's basically over. You could strip the whole thing back if you noticed anything, and start the whole process again. You can actually strip anodizing off by soaking it in a very strong caustic solution. That will actually remove all the anodizing back to bare aluminium, but it'll never anodize the same. You'll never get the same finish by doing it a second time. Trust me, I've done it. So we take the top off the boiling water. I'll turn the overhead light off so we get more natural color. You can see that it's just nice surface agitation here, which is what I want. If you don't want it too aggressive, you really, when you've got coloring in, you don't want really violent agitation. So I'll take the first part, basically water, and I'll drop that part into the tank. I'll take the next part, and I'll drop that into the bath. Now those parts they're basically hanging off fairly well. They're not actually touching the bottom, but I'm just going to put the camera down for a second, and I'm going to loop this wire a bit higher so they're sitting midway within the water. Right, there we go, that's done. Nicely sitting there. Give it a bit of a jiggle up and down. And I'll put the lid off the top there to maintain the water. Set the gas to a fraction higher to get it back up again. Just monitor it and make sure it really doesn't start boiling violently. I just want a nice agitation. To mention just a few minutes ago was setting a timer. Once the water is back up to a nice lightly boiling state, I normally would leave the part in for about 35 minutes. So I've set my timer for 30 minutes, and I'll start that off now. And when it goes off, I will bring the parts out. But what I will also continue to do is, again, as I mentioned previously, monitor that the water doesn't drop below the level of the surface of the part. so that you don't get any staining. More so important when you've got colour, because you won't get it out. So keep monitoring it. With all of these type of things, you've just got to be around. Don't just walk off and leave it. Just keep an eye on it, and you'll get a good result. Just back checking it again, one thing you will notice that once it starts the boiling process and the sealing process, a bit of colour will come out. It will be sort of leached out and boiled out. If you start to get too much of the black coming out, like this boiling water was turning quite black, then you know that the anodizing process wasn't long enough, wasn't deep enough, and the colour didn't soak in enough, so was just being boiled out. So you've got a problem there. But with mine, it's just, I can just notice a slight sort of tinge to the water, that just a little bit has come out. So I think I'm going to get a pretty good result. You can never tell until the end, till it all comes out and you've cleaned them up, but this is looking pretty promising at the moment. So stop the racket. Where's the stop button? Here we go. Stop button. Take the top off the saucepan, turn that light off. So a little bit of colour. Now it's been on for half an hour. A little bit of the black has leached out, but hopefully it will look pretty good. So yeah, that looks, I couldn't ask for better. That looks excellent. So now dip it in some rinsing water. That is also just going to cool it down, and put it on the cloth here, so I can then take the wire out and do the next one. Looks there, yeah, look at that, that looks pretty good to me. So put that down there, make sure the gas is turned off. Right, now, so we've got the two parts here looking pretty good. Now I'm drying it off. There's a little bit of a powdery film on the surface of the aluminium, but this part here on the left I have already wiped off, and I've done this side, still a bit of water on it, and it just wipes off with a cloth. Basically the finished, cleaned, wiped and dried part, you can see a pretty even black finish on that surface. One point about anodizing is it won't remove any scratches or marks on the surface of the aluminium. It's not going to smooth those out or anything. What you get as an end result is based on what and how well you prepared the part in the first place before anodizing. But sides are pretty good. There's a little spot there that's just been missed for some reason. That can be due to maybe a little something on the material that just didn't come off throughout the whole process. But if I hadn't have cleaned it the way that I did, then they'd be all over the place. So this is a pretty good result. Very even, nice and clean. I must admit, black is one of the hardest colors to do. If you don't get it right, it can end up coming out looking like a dark blue rather than a nice deep black. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. Best result I've had you doing black for a long time.
Just wanted to also mention a word on safety. Eye protection, very important whenever handling any of the chemicals, especially the acid. I use these most of the time, but I also have on hand a full face mask if I feel that's necessary. And also important to have disposable gloves. These are vinyl powder-free gloves, and I swap these over probably anything up to 4 times during the anodizing process. Stops getting fingerprints on the parts, and if you accidentally stick your finger in the acid or anything like that, it will protect. So just wrapping up, I hope you enjoyed and found these 2 videos useful on the anodizing process that I've adopted and I find works for me. I know there are lots of different ways that can be done, but what it is, the first thing is to get started. And once you get started, you'll develop your own sort of way of doing things, and it depends on what your environment is and what you've got access to, and just how much anodizing you do. When I first started anodizing, I used to do it almost every week. Now I don't do a lot because most of the projects that I machine are out of acrylic. But there are times when I still need to do some anodizing, and I still might do it maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So thank you for watching, and I hope you found all of this interesting. Bye.